Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to step back with me, not merely by decades or centuries, but by more than 600 years, to a Europe that may seem strange and distant, yet somehow familiar, through the flickering light of candles, the scent of smoke from countless hearths, and the quiet, patient rhythm of everyday life in the late Middle Ages. It is the year 1374. The world is still reeling from the aftershocks of the Black Death, which swept across the continent a generation before, leaving towns and villages half empty, their fields partially untended, and their churches filled with the silent prayers of those who had survived. Life is fragile in these times, yet it endures, in slow, deliberate motions, the plodding of oxen across fields, the distant toll of church bells, the shuffle of bare feet across cobblestones. You find yourself, if only for a moment, standing in a medieval European town, perhaps Aachen, in the region we now call Germany, though towns from the Low Countries to Italy would later experience similar events. The streets are narrow, uneven cobblestones underfoot, timber-framed houses lean gently against each other, their upper stories jutting out as if whispering secrets to the street below. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying with it the scent of baking bread, wood fires, and perhaps, in the air closer to the marketplaces, the tang of less pleasant odors, waste from stables, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present aroma of damp earth after a morning drizzle. The town is alive, in its own careful, measured way. Merchants call out their wares, though not too loudly, as decency and fear of God temper their voices. Children scurry along the edges of the streets, playing simple games, tossing stones or chasing one another with shrill laughter that echoes lightly against the walls of the buildings. The townsfolk move with purpose. The baker bends to pull a tray of bread from a stone oven. A blacksmith hammers steadily at an iron plate, sparks dancing and fading into the dim light. And yet, beneath this rhythm, there is a subtle unease, a whisper in the wind, as if the world itself is holding its breath. For in 1374, this particular spring, something extraordinary is about to unfold, something that will ripple through towns and villages in a way no plague, no famine, no war has quite managed. It is the beginning of a phenomenon historians would later call the dancing plague's lesser-known cousin, the Laughing Epidemic. Now, laughter, you might think of it as a sign of joy, of delight, of something wholesome, even, yet, here, in these medieval towns, laughter will become, well, something altogether different, something strange, unsettling, almost alien in its persistence, its contagiousness, its capacity to escape reason. But let us not hurry, for you must first understand the world in which this occurs, the social fabric, the rhythm of daily life, and the collective mind of 14th century Europe. Imagine the townsfolk gathering in small clusters, merchants and apprentices at the market, their wares displayed on rough-hewn tables, loaves of bread, bundles of herbs, pottery, iron tools, the women negotiating over cloth, holding up lengths of wool dyed in earthy reds and yellows. You see the children tugging at their mothers' skirts, begging for coins or scraps of bread, their voices cutting through the morning mist, and above all, the sound of laughter, gentle, soft, perhaps barely noticeable, yet it exists, and it is about to grow. This is not the laughter of amusement at a clever jest or the folly of a friend. It is something more persistent, more uncontrollable. It begins quietly, in a single household, perhaps with one child, or one young woman bent over her loom, fingers stiff from weaving. She lets out a chuckle, a giggle, and you might dismiss it at first. After all, the children are always playing, the women always busy, yet soon, it grows, spreads, and before long, you notice others, a neighbor perhaps, then another, laughter echoing in the narrow streets like a strange wind. The people of the town, they are devout, simple, accustomed to the hardships of life, yet their minds are fertile with superstition, with religious fervor, with tales of spirits and divine retribution. They are unsure how to interpret this. Is it a curse from God, sent to chastise them for some sin they have yet to name? Or perhaps, a sign of joy, divine in origin, though too strange for mortal understanding? And then, you notice, it does not stop. Once it starts, it continues, uncontrollable, exhausting. Some laugh until tears stream down their faces, until their sides ache, until their very breath fails them. Mothers clutch at children who cannot cease their giggling. Young men stagger through the streets, laughter spilling from their lips like water from a broken vessel. Monks in the cloister pause mid-prayer, bewildered. Some of them even join in, though none knows why. The town elders, they are perplexed. They hold meetings in the dim light of candlelit halls, discuss the matter quietly. The priest advises prayer, the apothecary offers herbs to calm the mind, but the laughter persists. And you wander these streets, perhaps unseen, taking in the scene, the way the sun falls softly on the timbered buildings, the smell of wet earth and burning wood mingling in the air, the faint melody of a lute played by a boy near the fountain, yet all around, an underlying current of something uncontrollable, something human and inexplicable. It is also, of course, a time of recovery and anxiety. Europe has been scarred by the plague, by wars between petty kingdoms, by the ceaseless demands of the church. Superstition, faith, and fear mingle in every heart, and now, this laughter, this phenomenon, it does not announce itself politely, it intrudes, it confounds, it reshapes the ordinary life of townsfolk into something extraordinary. You must picture, perhaps, a small schoolhouse where a handful of children are being taught their letters. The tutor, a stern man with thin spectacles and a voice used to quieting restive pupils, suddenly notices one child doubling over in laughter. He scolds, tries to intervene, and yet, another child, then another, succumbs to the same contagion. Soon, the room echoes with laughter so unrestrained, so infectious, that even the tutor cannot resist a small, nervous chuckle, though he quickly corrects himself. Meanwhile, at the market, the vendors exchange wary glances, coins spill from leather pouches as men and women clutch their sides, laughter spilling over in public. Some are amused, some alarmed. Merchants have never seen such a phenomenon, their transactions falter, and yet, there is a sense, oddly, that the world continues. The bread is still baked, the ale still poured, the church bells still toll. You may wonder, how can laughter be so contagious? How does it spread from person to person, from street to street, from village to village, in a time when roads are rough, travel is slow, and communication is constrained to word of mouth? Here, in the quiet hours, you might speculate, perhaps it is indeed a form of mass hysteria, a psychological contagion amplified by the shared stress and grief of a post-plague society, or perhaps, it is something else, something that cannot yet be named. And yet, for all its strangeness, there is a rhythm to it, a pattern that medieval minds begin to notice, however imperfectly. The laughter begins in one household, spreads to another, accelerates with proximity, falters when a person isolates themselves, and then, mysteriously, it ends, as suddenly as it began, leaving only exhaustion, confusion, and a lingering sense of wonder. Now, as we wander further into the streets, past the churches, past the inns, past the market stalls, you may notice something else. The townsfolk, despite their fatigue, continue their routines. There is resilience here, a human stubbornness that persists even in the face of inexplicable events. Mothers still fetch water from the wells, blacksmiths still hammer iron, bakers still tend their ovens, and you, dear listener, are present, observing, feeling, sensing the delicate tension between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And so, we leave the town at dusk, the sun sinking slowly behind timbered rooftops, the streets now quieter, though laughter still echoes faintly, like distant bells, the smell of evening fires mingling with damp earth, the townsfolk retreating into their homes, some still laughing, some resting, some praying, a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief, of bewilderment and curiosity. This is the world in which our tale begins, a world poised between the familiar and the inexplicable, a world where laughter, Something so ordinary becomes a window into the extraordinary, and you are here to witness it, to listen, to wander with me through the events that will unfold over the coming weeks, months, in some cases, even years. And as we linger in this quiet evening, let us prepare ourselves for what comes next, the spread of the laughter, the peculiar characters who will become entwined with this event, and the ways in which an entire region will react, for the story, dear listener, has only just begun. So, now, dear listener, we find ourselves wandering further into the life of the town. The laughter has begun to echo from house to house, street to street, small at first, almost polite in its intrusion, yet, like a slow-moving tide, it grows, in volume, in persistence, in the quiet urgency that comes when something ordinary becomes inexplicably extraordinary. You might first encounter Hildegard, a young woman of perhaps 16 summers, her family modest, living in a timbered house on the edge of the marketplace. She works at her loom, the rhythmic motion of weaving meant to soothe her hands, yet today, she cannot stop herself. The first chuckle escapes her lips. She tries to suppress it, clutching her hands over her mouth, but it is too late. The laughter bubbles uncontrollably, spreading to her younger brother, who had been fetching water from the well, and soon, even the neighbor peering in through the window to inquire about a missing bundle of cloth, finds themselves unable to restrain their own mirth. And so it begins, with a handful, a small circle of people who cannot stop, and you, listening, may begin to feel the peculiar contagion of empathy, for even as we narrate, you may find yourself smiling, softly, quietly, not from amusement, but from the recognition of something profoundly human, something mysterious. The town elders convene in the hall of the guild, a stone structure with heavy oak beams, torches flickering along the walls, their faces solemn, lined with concern, for they are men accustomed to dealing with misfortune, with famine, with pestilence, yet nothing quite like this, nothing that comes upon them as laughter, contagious, unrelenting, and defiant of reason. One of them, perhaps named Master Conrad, speaks carefully, his voice a low rumble, a mixture of authority and fatigue. "Is it the work of demons?" he asks. "Or the wrath of God upon our sins?" His colleagues murmur, some nodding, others shaking their heads. The apothecary, a man of some learning, offers herbs to calm the afflicted, chamomile, valerian, yet they find little success. The laughter persists. Meanwhile, in the marketplace, life continues in fits and starts. Merchants hesitate to engage customers, coins are dropped as hands clutch sides, a child falls to the ground, laughing uncontrollably. Their mother, torn between amusement and worry, tries to pick them up, and you, dear listener, can sense the delicate interplay of chaos and ordinary life, the way humans continue to function even as the ground shifts beneath them. It is said that the laughter often lasts hours, sometimes days, until the body can take no more. Exhaustion overtakes the afflicted, their breath shallow, their cheeks wet with tears, and yet, some recover quickly, others remain in a state of gentle bewilderment, unable to explain why they laughed, why they could not stop. There are, of course, those who view the phenomenon differently. Father Johannes, a monk at the nearby abbey, interprets it as a spiritual test, a divine message disguised as merriment. He urges prayer, fasting, and confession, walking among the afflicted with soft-spoken guidance, murmuring scripture, yet even he cannot entirely suppress a small, nervous laugh when the sound of uncontrollable mirth spills into the quiet cloisters. And then, there is Petra, a widow of gentle demeanor, who watches the events unfold with curiosity. She tends to her garden during the day, herbs, vegetables, and flowers that smell faintly of earth and sunlight. She observes her neighbors, laughing and recovering, wondering at the strange interplay between mind, body, and community. Sometimes, she whispers to herself, "Perhaps the world needs laughter more than it knows," a thought so quiet it might be missed, yet somehow it lingers. The laughter spreads beyond a single household, from Aachen to the surrounding towns, small villages, Travelers who had witnessed it in one place carry the contagion unwittingly to another. It is as if the very air carries it, a vibration in the social fabric, impossible to confine, impossible to reason with. You might imagine a scene along a cobblestone street. A small boy, clutching a wooden toy, suddenly bursts into laughter. The sound is light, ringing, almost musical. A young woman passing by begins to giggle, then a man tending his horse, the baker rolling dough, even the priest stepping from the church. Before long, the entire street seems overtaken by a soft, rolling wave of mirth, a phenomenon both bewildering and oddly beautiful. The people of the town attempt remedies, some isolating the afflicted in quiet chambers, believing that physical separation might arrest the spread. Others attempt herbal concoctions, poultices, even mild purgatives. Yet the laughter refuses such interventions. It is resilient, persistent, and enigmatic. And in the midst of this, stories arise, rumors passed from person to person. It is a curse from the devil, some say. It is a blessing from heaven, others whisper. A midwife claims she saw laughter descend from the heavens like a cloud, while a blacksmith insists it is the work of mischievous spirits, playing tricks on the townsfolk. The truth remains elusive, and perhaps that is the very essence of this phenomenon. Even the children, who are often the first affected, become both victims and carriers. Again, they cannot control, an echo of a human instinct so deep that reason itself cannot compete. Some children laugh until their bodies are spent, others continue to giggle sporadically for days, and yet they are otherwise healthy. The contrast, so stark, so puzzling. One particularly striking account comes from a young apprentice named Heinrich. He was tending a stall of woven cloths when the laughter first struck him. At first, he laughed silently, biting his lips to stifle the sound, but soon, he was overcome, unable to speak, unable to trade, his hands trembling, his chest heaving with the effort of unrestrained mirth, and around him, the market echoed with similar scenes, women clutching baskets, children rolling in the dust, men leaning on carts, all caught in the same inexplicable spell. And yet, there are moments of calm, brief respites, when the laughter ebbs, when the sun passes through clouds, casting long shadows on the cobblestones, when the smell of fresh bread and hay fills the air, when townsfolk pause to regain composure. These moments are fleeting, but they allow for reflection, for conversation, for speculation, for storytelling, which, of course, is how history is remembered. It is fascinating, is it not, to consider the psychological dimension of this event, that in a time of fear, scarcity, and grief, the human mind might turn to laughter, uncontrollable, mysterious, yet oddly unifying. It is as if the body seeks release where the world offers none, as if joy and fear are intertwined, inseparable, a delicate thread woven into the fabric of life. In 1374, the town scribes, meanwhile, attempt to record the events, carefully noting who laughed, where, and for how long. Their chronicles are meticulous, yet strained, for they write not only of the observable phenomenon, but also of the collective anxiety, the confusion, the whispered prayers, and the occasional, quiet delight at the absurdity of it all. And so, you can picture, if only faintly, the human tapestry of a European town under this peculiar spell, a place where ordinary life continues, where bread is baked, fires are lit, prayers are uttered, yet beneath it all, an invisible current of laughter winds its way through the streets, the homes, the churches, connecting, bewildering, exhausting, and, for reasons no one yet understands, persisting. By the end of the first week, the townsfolk are divided, some fear for their souls, others for their health, some simply marvel at the resilience of laughter itself, the young and the old, the rich and the poor, all caught in a moment of shared, inexplicable humanity. And you, dear listener, you feel it too, as if, in recounting these events, the sound of laughter touches your ears, not in mockery, not in jest, but in gentle acknowledgement of the strange, enduring nature of human experience. The stage is now set for the broader spread of the epidemic, for neighboring towns, curious travelers, and chroniclers to bear witness, for the interplay of superstition, observation, and human endurance to unfold, and for the mystery, the enduring, unresolved mystery, of the 1374 Laughing Epidemic, to deepen. And as the sun sets behind timbered rooftops, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, we leave the town in this delicate, tentative moment, laughter still audible in the distance, hearts both lightened and weighed, minds full of wonder, and you, dear listener, poised to journey further into the events, the characters, and the human stories that will define this peculiar chapter of history. Now, dear listener, we move beyond the first wave. Beyond the immediate wonder of laughter in the streets, to the subtler, more intricate aspects of the 1374 epidemic. The threads of daily life, the mingling of speculation, superstition, and human resilience. The phenomenon, of course, cannot be understood in isolation. You must consider the wider context. The Europe of the late 14th century is a tapestry of small towns, bustling market villages, monasteries, and castles. A continent still reeling from the Black Death, its population reduced, its labor force diminished, its social hierarchies shaken. People are vigilant, anxious, prone to fear, but also, perhaps, strangely, eager for signs of life, of hope, of something unexpected. And here, in this fragile equilibrium, laughter arrives, not as mere amusement, but as a force that refuses to be contained. Some historians have speculated, perhaps rightly, that the epidemic is a form of mass psychogenic illness, amplified by stress, grief, and the close-knit nature of medieval communities, yet others prefer to see it as a spiritual phenomenon, a divine test, or even, for the more imaginative, a visitation by otherworldly forces. The townsfolk, you can picture them, going about their daily routines, yet always aware, always watchful. The baker kneads dough, sweat beading on his forehead, yet he pauses as a neighbor collapses into uncontrollable laughter. The blacksmith, hammering rhythmically, notices the apprentices giggling over a spilled bucket of water. The priest, entering the chapel, hears the faint echoes of mirth drifting in from the street, and he wonders, softly, whether the laughter is a message, or merely a reminder of how fragile reason can be. In some households, the laughter is followed by exhaustion, pallor on the cheeks, trembling limbs, the slow return of breath. Families tend to one another, offering water, herbal infusions, gentle reassurance, while the more devout pray quietly, beseeching God to lift the strange affliction. In other homes, laughter comes and goes in waves, sometimes hours apart, leaving a lingering sense of unreality, as if the very air has shifted. Scholars, of course, have tried to make sense of these occurrences, some turning to natural explanations, citing spoiled rye bread contaminated with ergot fungus, a subtle, chemical agent capable of inducing convulsions, hallucinations, and perhaps even uncontrolled laughter. Others, more cautious, note that the social environment may play a stronger role, communities, traumatized and tight-knit, responding in collective ways that science alone cannot explain. And yet, the human stories remain compelling. Consider Greta, a widow with 3 children. She is meticulous in her care, herbs laid out, bread baked. She tends to her small flock of chickens, and yet, one afternoon, she too is overtaken, laughter spilling from her lips, unbidden, unstoppable. She collapses onto her straw-covered floor, the children giggling alongside her. Neighbors peer through the window, uncertain whether to intervene, to pray, to flee, or to join in. In the monasteries, life is similarly disrupted. Monks, accustomed to silence, to prayer, to the discipline of routine, find themselves in quiet consternation. Some laugh, some observe, some take careful notes. Chroniclers record events meticulously, the names of the afflicted, the duration of their laughter, the ebb and flow across villages, yet even they are uncertain, uncertain of cause, uncertain of meaning, uncertain if their pens are adequate instruments for capturing what is, at heart, ineffable. Meanwhile, the epidemic spreads, slowly, from town to town, as travelers carry the contagion. A young man journeying with a cart of wool from Aachen to Cologne finds himself laughing in the inn. The laughter spreads to other travelers, the innkeeper, the cook, even the cats, perhaps, who watch with quiet disapproval. Before long, the next town awakens to the same phenomenon, a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and bemused curiosity. The daily life of townsfolk becomes a delicate balance. Work continues, markets open, trades are made, meals are prepared, yet always under the shadow of potential disruption. Laughter can erupt anywhere, at any time. It becomes a silent companion, a reminder of the fragility of human composure, and perhaps, too, of the fragility of human understanding. Some theorists, in later centuries, have suggested more unusual explanations, that the laughter was a form of social rebellion, a subtle, unstructured resistance to authority, that it was, in essence, a communal release of tension, for in towns still scarred by plague, by tax burdens, by the occasional threat of bandits, perhaps laughter was, unconsciously, a way to reclaim a sense of agency, of vitality, of shared humanity. Consider, if you will, the children, who are often at the forefront. Their laughter is especially contagious, the innocent, unrestrained mirth of youth, untempered by reason, by fear, by caution. They run through streets and alleys, their voices ringing, and adults, despite themselves, join in, a gentle irony, perhaps, that the young teach the old, even in an affliction, something profoundly human, something irrepressible. The impact on commerce is subtle but undeniable. Merchants hesitate, transactions falter, coins fall from hands as bodies convulse with laughter, goods spoil, livestock is neglected for hours at a time. Yet, remarkably, the rhythm of town life endures. It is as if the human spirit, guided by necessity, cannot be fully derailed. And so, the chroniclers of the time note patterns, small observations. The laughter begins in the morning, or perhaps mid-afternoon. It lasts hours. It sometimes ceases with exhaustion. It spreads more easily among those in close contact. It ebbs when people separate. It seems to favor children and young adults. Yet there are exceptions. The rich, the powerful, even the devoutly religious, all are susceptible. It is also, perhaps, in these moments, that humor and resilience intermingle, for even in the midst of bewilderment, the townsfolk find ways to cope. A merchant whispers a joke to an afflicted apprentice. A mother hums a lullaby to a laughing child. A monk scribbles a note in the margin of his chronicle with a small, dry smile. These tiny human gestures, quiet defiance of the inexplicable, are themselves remarkable. And so the weeks pass, the epidemic moves from town to town, its cause mysterious, its effect uneven. Some towns experience it briefly, a few hours, others for days, yet always, it leaves traces, memories, stories to be whispered in homes and monasteries, the names of those affected, the peculiar details of their laughter, the faint sense that the world, however perilous, is capable of extraordinary, inexplicable moments of collective experience. You may imagine, at twilight, as the sun dips behind the hills, smoke rising from chimneys, the faint scent of cooking fires, children resting, exhausted, adults nursing sore sides, the quiet of streets disrupted only by occasional giggles, that strange, lingering, human echo. It is here, in these quieter moments, that reflection creeps in. Historians of later centuries would speculate endlessly. What caused the laughter? Was it ergot poisoning? Mass hysteria? A spiritual visitation? A subtle form of social release? The truth remains elusive, and perhaps it should, for part of the charm, part of the profound wonder, lies precisely in its unexplained nature. And you, dear listener, wandering with me through these events, you sense the delicate interplay, the mixture of fear, joy, fatigue, and curiosity, the ways in which humans respond to the incomprehensible, how life, remarkably, continues, despite interruption, despite confusion, despite exhaustion. In daily life, the epidemic reminds us of the fragility and resilience of routine. A baker returns to his oven, a blacksmith hammers iron, a priest prays, children play, merchants continue their trades, all under the gentle shadow of laughter, a companion both unwelcome and oddly enchanting. The laughter also serves as a mirror, reflecting the human need for connection, for shared experience, for recognition that life, even when strange or perilous, continues, and that sometimes the simplest expressions, like a laugh, can ripple through communities, defying logic, expectation, and authority. And so, dear listener, as we linger on these quiet streets, as dusk settles over the timbered roofs, as the last light touches the cobblestones, we begin to see the full pattern, the way the epidemic intertwines with daily life, with human psychology, with societal structures, and yet, the mystery persists, as it must, for the world of 1374, like our own, is only partially comprehensible. The townsfolk, exhausted but resilient, continue, the chroniclers record, the monks pray, the children rest, the laughter, now faint, now echoing, a reminder that life, in all its strangeness, continues. Ah, dear listener, as the days and weeks of 1374 pass, as the laughter ebbs and flows, we begin to step back, to take the long view, to observe not just the curious episodes of uncontrolled mirth, but the enduring impact they leave on the people, the towns, and the generations to come. By the time the epidemic wanes, when the echoes of laughter have faded into memory, the townsfolk find themselves changed, subtly, quietly, in ways both practical and profound. Families recover, children return to their studies, markets reopen, the baker's oven glows once more, the blacksmith hammers iron, yet there is a lingering sense, a gentle reminder, that life can surprise, that human experience is vast, and sometimes inexplicably, joyously, uncontainable. Chroniclers, in their candlelit chambers, record the events with a mixture of awe and meticulous care. They write of dates, of places, of names, of durations, yet they also note the human reaction, the fear, the exhaustion, the small moments of humor, the empathy, the resilience. These texts, careful and deliberate, will survive centuries, providing us, you and I, a window into the very human heart of 14th century Europe. And what of the explanations, you may wonder? Well, even now, centuries later, historians debate, was it mass hysteria, a collective psychosomatic response to trauma and stress? Was it ergot poisoning, a fungal agent contaminating the bread that sustained entire towns? Or perhaps, it was something more spiritual, an ineffable force, a reminder that human emotion, unbounded and contagious, can sometimes escape the neat confines of reason. We may never know, and perhaps it is not the knowing that matters most, but the reflection, the insight, the recognition of how interconnected human experience can be, the understanding that laughter, unrestrained, mysterious, and inexplicable, can unite communities, expose fragility, and reveal the quiet depths of our shared humanity. You might imagine the townsfolk, in the quiet after the epidemic, walking the streets at dawn, the sun rising over the timbered rooftops, gilding the morning mist, merchants setting out their wares, children chasing one another with subdued giggles, mothers fetching water, monks tending their gardens, all of them carrying the memory of a strange week, a strange month, when laughter became an uninvited visitor, and yet, somehow, a teacher. It is in these moments, these reflective hours, that we begin to sense the legacy of the 1374 Laughing Epidemic, not just in chronicles or scholarly debate, but in the human psyche itself, the understanding that communities, however bound by circumstance, can respond in collective ways, that emotion is a force of its own, and that even the most inexplicable events can leave traces of beauty, connection, and wonder. Some towns adapted their routines, a bit more cautiously, aware that the unexpected might return. Others simply returned to life as before, grateful for the resilience of their bodies, the strength of their neighbors, the warmth of shared humanity. Children played more freely, mothers laughed more often, and perhaps, somewhere in a quiet corner, the older generation reflected on the simple absurdity of life, and found, in it, a gentle consolation. Stories of the epidemic spread beyond local borders. Travelers carried tales of contagious laughter to distant villages. Chroniclers copied accounts for the benefit of posterity, and centuries later, historians like ourselves, or, in your case, listeners like yourself, peer into these records and feel, if only faintly, the echo of human experience, the soft reverberation of a laughter that refused to be tamed. There is a subtle lesson, perhaps, in this history, a reminder that life is composed not only of work, of hardship, of expectation, but also of the unexpected, the uncontrollable, the strangely unifying, that even in times of anxiety or scarcity, joy, in its most mysterious forms, can ripple through communities, fleeting, persistent, contagious, and ultimately, humanizing. And so we may close our journey, slowly, gently, as the candle flickers in the dim chamber, as your mind drifts along the quiet streets of 1374, the laughter now a memory, the townsfolk returning to their routines, the sun dipping below distant hills, and the world, though never quite as orderly as we might wish, continuing, softly, tenderly, persistently. You might imagine yourself walking one last time through that medieval town, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet, the scent of evening fires lingering in the air, windows glowing with the warmth of hearths, the faintest echoes of laughter carried on a gentle breeze, a reminder that the human heart, resilient and unpredictable, persists, even through the most inexplicable of events. And as night falls, the stars emerging in a clear, deep sky, you reflect on the quiet beauty of history, the way it preserves not only facts, but the essence of human experience, the mixture of fear and joy, of curiosity and endurance, of reason and wonder, and perhaps, as you drift toward your own rest, you carry a small, private echo of that 14th century laughter, soft, unbidden, yet strangely comforting. Tea is here, dear listener, at the gentle close of our tale, that we may pause, that we may allow the story to settle, like a soft dust upon the pages of history, like a whisper in the mind, like the final notes of a quiet song. The 1374 Laughing Epidemic remains a curious, human story, a testament to resilience, to community, to the inexplicable joy that sometimes touches us, even when we least expect it. And now, let your mind wander, softly, peacefully, through those cobblestone streets, past the timbered houses, past the exhausted but smiling townsfolk, past the monks and the merchants, the children and the widows. Let the echoes of laughter fade gently into memory, and feel, in that fading, a subtle warmth. A reminder that history, even when strange, can be tender, can be human, and can, above all, invite us to observe, to reflect, and to simply be.